Hello, everyone. Uh, in these set of videos, I'm going to go over chapter 7, which is the chapter on memory. I'm going to go over just a handful of theories, memory theories. I'm going to focus on the Atkinson-Shiffrin theory, parallel processing, and then I'll talk a little bit about long-term memory and things like that. And then I'll focus for a little while on forgetting and some of the theories on forgetting. But I'm going to begin here talking about what we call the Atkinson-Shiffrin theory. There's a good chance you've heard of the Atkinson-Shiffrin theory. This is the one that includes sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory, which are terms that you've probably at least heard before. And I'm going to talk about the three different storage of memory. Again, sensory, short-term, and long-term memory, how they function, the capacity, the duration. And I'm also going to talk about sort of the process of how memory goes from each storage to the next. And what does that mean in your everyday life? So I'm going to begin here talking about sensory memory. And sensory memory, for a lot of people, is the most confusing kind of memory. The easiest way to think about sensory memory is streaming. When your friend calls you on FaceTime or Skype and they talk to you, maybe they tell you something important. Hey, remember to meet me at this address at this time. Here's the phone number. If you forget and you want to get that video of your friend talking to you, can you go in your phone and just find it? No, right? Um, unless you captured that video, unless you recorded that video with a different program or a different app, then that video just doesn't exist in your phone because that video was only streaming through the phone. That is, the data came in, the computer in your phone translated it into video and audio, and then that's it. It never recorded it. It just completely went away. And that's kind of the way sensory memory works. The sensory input comes in, but unless you go out of your way to store it, unless you go out of your way to record it, it doesn't record it. And so when you think about your phone streaming some video, well, you can think about, the phone getting the information, the data traveling through the internet or phone lines or whatever to get to the computer on your phone. The computer on your phone turns it into video or audio. But again, once you see it, it just completely deleted. It's not even deleted. It never gets recorded. It goes up in smoke. It just is never recorded in your phone. And again, sensory memory is just like this. Now, the information isn't coming because of a phone. It's coming because of your senses, right? So you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, a bunch of things, nonstop information. And that goes through your afferent neurons to your brain, and your brain decodes it. Paints a picture, it gives you audio, and it gives you a bunch of extra stuff, smell and taste and touch. But just like your phone, if you don't record it, then it goes up in smoke. It's just never recorded into your brain. It's not even deleted. It's just never truly recorded in your brain. Now, uh, we call this, especially when we're talking about visual and auditory sensory memory, we call it echoic or iconic memory. And that'll show up in a few questions. Echoic, think of the word echo, right? Echoic memory is auditory sensory memory, and that will only last in your mind for about 2 seconds. If someone says something and you don't pay attention to it, you have about 2 seconds to pay attention to it before you just have no access to it. Every once in a while, you'll be on your phone. Someone will maybe they're giving you a phone number, and you're too busy writing down the first numbers. So by the time they say the last couple of numbers, you weren't really paying attention to it. But so long as you go back to it within 2 seconds, then you can still kind of hear it in your mind, echoing in your mind for about 2 seconds. But again, if you don't focus on it after those 2 seconds, then it just goes away. And it doesn't matter how much you focus, it will not come back because you didn't focus on it in time. Iconic memory, think about the icon on your computers. Uh, an icon is visual sensory memory, and that's going to last less than a second. If you look at someone's, let's say someone's t-shirt, and you turn around, and before you actually think about it, a whole second passes, you will not have access to that memory anymore. Now, if you focus on it within a second, less than a second, about 0.3 tenths of a second, then you will be able to hold on to it for a little bit longer. But otherwise, it will just go away. Now, the capacity in your sensory memory is really large. You can take in a lot of information. Right now, you're listening to me speak to you. You are maybe staring at your computer, maybe staring at your phone, maybe you're even driving, and you're just taking in a bunch of information. And you don't really have to focus on a lot of that. If you're driving, you're just sort of working on it as you go along. And so if you don't focus on most of those things, doesn't really matter so long as you focus on the things that matter. If someone shifts into your lane or if an important sign comes up. And so um, you get a bunch of information. And not only do you get it right now, this second, but right now again, and the whole thing again, right now. Just every moment, every second, you're getting just blasted by information, visual, auditory, uh, tact, uh, tactile memory, excuse me, olfactory memory, et cetera, et cetera. You're uh, getting information all the time, every second, nonstop. If you tried to record all of that information, then you would just use up your brain. They just wouldn't have enough brain to take in all of that information every second of every day. And so what your brain does, it ignores most of it. It just deletes it, never even records it in reality. And so you just focus or you just keep the things that you focus on, the things that you pay attention. Um, so in your phone, if you wanted to keep that video, you have to have some sort of app on it. You have to be able to record the video through some sort of screen capture. But you have a type of screen capture in your mind as well. It's not a big red button that says record. It's an app that you have, focusing or paying attention, right? And so long as you can focus or pay attention to a specific aspect of your memory, of your short-term memory, excuse me, of your sensory memory, then that will shift it over into short-term memory. From sensory, it goes to short-term memory. Okay. Now, in short-term memory, again, think of short-term memory as a medium folder or a middle folder. On your computer, sometimes you download things from the internet, and you usually download them to a download folder. And depending on how you have your computer set up, that might last in your download folder for a day, if you have it set up like that, to maybe a year, if you've never really set it up. But eventually, from that download folder, those files that you have downloaded onto them, they'll eventually get deleted. That's the point of that download folder, that it'll eventually just delete the old files. And the same thing happens with your short-term memory. When you focus on something from sensory memory, you're basically downloading it into your short-term memory. But it's only going to last there for a little while, a very short while, about 30 seconds. If you're using it, then that's great. Then you can hold on to it for a little bit longer. And that's what we call maintenance rehearsal. You basically rehearse it, and so you keep it in your short-term memory just another 30 seconds, and then just another 30 seconds. Um, and then if you don't need it anymore, then you can stop thinking about it and it'll get deleted just like before. But if you want to hold on to it longer, then you have to do the next step, which is rehearsal. Again, um, in short-term memory, you download all of these files, but eventually, if you don't pay attention to them, after about 30 seconds, they'll just go up in smoke again. They will get deleted. How do you keep them any longer? Well, then you have to rehearse. Rehearse includes a lot of things. It includes things like repeating it to yourself. That's very simple rehearsal. That's what children do. But studying, going over topics, um, refinding them, that memory in your brain over and over again, that um, helps you with rehearsal, and it helps you find the memories more easily later on. Breaking them down into topics or uh, giving yourself examples. All of these things are forms of rehearsal that allow you to then download this memory into long-term memory so that you can hold it forever. Now, short-term memory doesn't last very long. Um, Now, short-term memory also doesn't have a lot of capacity. So I already kind of mentioned that it doesn't last very long, um, but the capacity is very limited as well. Um, and we say that you can hold 7 plus or minus 2 items. And that's kind of a convoluted way of saying that. We could just as easily say 5 to 9 items, but that's not what we say. We don't say 5 to 9. We say 7 plus or minus 2 items, because your short-term memory works by chunking things into bigger pieces. And so what is 7 pieces to me might actually be more than 9 to you, depending on the topic. And what might be 7 pieces to you might be more than 9 for me, depending on the topic. Because capacity here has to do with mastery. And so I always like to give the example of your friend who his house is a total mess. His room is a total mess. And if you ever seen your friend clean up, um, they might like pick up one item, they'll pick up one sock, and then they'll kind of stare blankly into the distance for a while, and then they'll go, I'll just do it later. Okay. We've all probably seen somebody do something like that. And what's happening there is that their capacity has gotten full. They've gotten to 7 to 9 items way too fast, and they've basically frozen over with too much information in their short-term memory. And this kind of works in their working memory as well. But I'll talk more deeply about working memory in just a little bit. Now, the same way that this person just sort of shorts out, you also know somebody else who can like clean their whole house and cook and like, I don't know, do their taxes all at the same time, and they don't seem to freeze over. And so, how is that possible? Well, what's happening there is level of mastery. What is 7 to 9 pieces to your friend Joe, whose house is a mess, is only like 3 to 4 pieces of information to your friend Betty, whose house is perfectly clean. And if we go back to Betty's childhood, we can see what the difference is, right? There's a good chance that when Betty was young, when she was like 5 years old, mom told her once, "Hey, Betty, you see these toys here on the floor? Please pick them up and put them in the toy bin." And at first, that was really difficult for Betty, right? That almost took all of her 9 spots in her short term memory. She had to think about picking up a toy, resisting the urge from playing with that toy. Remember to walk to the bin, put the toy down, resist the urge from taking up another toy. Remember the toys that are still on the floor, return to them, pick up another toy, and do the whole process over and over again. So for 5-year-old Betty, that was really, really difficult. But mom kept on telling her to do it over and over and over and over, day after day, for probably weeks or months. And eventually, what was 9 pieces of information in Betty's short term memory ended up becoming 7, 5, 2. Just pick them up and put them in the bin. And so when Betty first started, she picked up one toy at a time. But after a few months, she can pick up 2 and 3 toys because she has enough short term memory left over as she picks up one to go, "Oh, let me pick up another one," and then put them in the bin. And now, once Betty has mastered this skill, once this skill of picking up toys and putting them in the bin is 2 or 3 pieces of information, mom comes along and says, "Hey, Betty, can you take your toys and put them in the bin? And also, you see those clothes lying on the floor? Can you put those in the hamper?" And so she's raised the difficulty level again. And so now Betty, again, it takes up more information, but she's already mastered the picking up thing. So it's not so difficult. But mom keeps on adding more and more things. Clean the counter, put the pillows on the bed, maybe fold the blanket or something like that. And Betty gets older and older, and now she's cleaning up her room and fixing up the drawers and cleaning the bathroom. And by the time she's, in her 20s, then cleaning her whole house is 1 or 2 items in her mind. Fix the drawers, do the laundry, clean the bathroom, and everything else she just does as it comes along because she's already sort of chunked most of the information into simple bites. And so she has enough short term memory left over to cook dinner and, do the taxes if that's what she's doing. But for your friend Joe, no one ever taught him how to do that. No one ever went the step by step. And I know people sometimes say, no one needs to teach a 15-year-old how to clean their room, except that you absolutely do. Not the cleaning part, but the breaking it down part. That takes time and effort and mastery. And so your friend Joe is 20 and he still gets stuck. He still gets freezes over. Now, this doesn't mean that Joe is less intelligent. You might see Joe do his math homework, and in the middle of his math homework, he's texting his friend and looking things up on the internet. And, he's able to jump from task to task quite easily because those tasks, doing homework, texting on with his friend, looking something up in the internet, those are all things he's mastered. And so he knows how to chunk those things quite well. Um, oops. Okay. Now, once you get something into short-term memory and you rehearse it well enough, well, then you can get it into long-term memory. But that is the only way to get things into long-term memory is by rehearsal. Anything short of rehearsal, you won't get it into long-term memory. And we'll talk about forgetting a little later. Sometimes you can get something in long-term memory, but if you don't strengthen the connections, then it could be in long-term memory and it's still hard to retrieve, to pull it out so that you can use it. Um, And so, first of all, you'll notice there that uh, when you put something into long-term memory, one of the functions as you put something into long-term memory is that you organize the information. And so, however you organize the information into long-term memory tends to be the way you retrieve it. And so I can go out and do an experiment and ask everyone to tell me the days of the week or the months of the year or to tell me the alphabet. And I could bet money that everyone is going to start out with January and everyone is going to end with December for the months. And everyone is going to start out with Sunday or Monday. Some people start with Monday. But in any case, they're going to start with Sunday and end with Saturday, or start with Monday and end with Sunday. Um, and everybody's going to start with the letter A, and everybody's going to end with the letter Z. And absolutely no one is going to go, oh, yeah, the alphabet, G, P, Q, L, S, right? No one remembers the alphabet in any other way except the alphabet, except maybe the QWERTY style, your keyboard. Some people do know it that way. But even those people are probably going to tell you the alphabet in alphabetical order, because that is usually the way that we have put it into our brain. And so therefore it is the way we pull it out. This is one of the ways that we can tell if someone might be suffering from dementia even before the dementia starts to get bad. We'll ask them questions and we'll see if they organize the information. Um, so, for example, we might tell someone a story, and the story might go something like Rosie went to the store and she needed to buy some things, and she needed to buy a hammer, bleach, strawberries, nails, detergent, lettuce, sandpaper, disinfectant wipes, and grapes. And then we'll ask, what did Rosie have to buy? And at first, nobody remembers everything. But most people just try to say the list in order. So what we'll do is we will just tell the story again. Rosie went to the store and she needed to buy a couple of items. The items included a hammer and bleach and strawberries, nails, detergent, and lettuce, sandpaper, disinfectant wipes, and grapes. And we'll just repeat it over and over and over again. And usually, if someone does not have dementia, then they will start to pick up on a pattern, and they might notice that the items can be grouped into certain groups. And I only said it twice, but some of you might have already noticed that there are certain groups. The groups include things like tools, cleaning products, and food items. And eventually, once the mind picks up on that, the mind stops trying to remember the list in order. Essentially, they stop trying to organize the information in order, and they start to organize it by type. And so now people will go, oh, yeah, Rosie needs to buy a hammer and nails and sandpaper, bleach, detergent, and disinfectant wipes, and strawberries, lettuce, and grapes. And so they'll separate it into types of items. But people who have dementia never start to do that. They just don't quite grasp the order or the types of things, and so they always try to remember the items in order, and so therefore they never quite put it into long-term memory. They never quite um, uh, rehearse it in a way that is easy to retrieve from long-term memory. Now, for people who make it their business to know these kinds of things, um, researchers suggest that we have about 2.8 quintillion bytes of memory, and For you and me, basically what that means is that unless we get turned into vampires and live forever, uh, we we will never run out of memory. Our memory essentially is endless for a normal human life. Um, and so long as we get the information into long-term memory, then it'll be there forever. Um, there are ways that we can corrupt memory, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to forgetting. But if you get information into your long-term memory, then it tends to stay there forever. Let me give you an example. So this is a piece of research. They went to a college where they had access to lots of different aged alumni. This college usually has people, come back for activities. A lot of the alumni just participate a great deal in the college even after they graduate. And so researchers like that because they get access to a lot of these individuals. And what they did was they gave students a simple Spanish language vocabulary test. Now, all of these students had taken Spanish as one of their courses. And what they found was that if you took Spanish 25 years ago, but you got an A, you tended to remember more Spanish language vocabulary than someone who took Spanish last semester but got a C. What that means is if you did the hard work to get the information inside of your brain, well, then it's just in there. But if you didn't do that hard work, if you never got it inside of your brain into long-term memory, then doesn't matter how long ago it was, whether it was just yesterday or 25 years later, you're just never going to remember it because you don't have it in long-term memory.